Welcome to the Work Intelligence Podcast. I'm Todd Michaud. I'm your host for today's session, and I'm so pleased to welcome an amazing person as my guest today, Wayne Miller, EVP and Chief Innovation Officer at the ICBA. Welcome, Wayne. I'm thrilled to have you.
Todd, thanks. A privilege to be with you. We've had the pleasure of working together for quite some time. So, what a delight to be able to share some thinking and have a great conversation with you today about innovation.
Well, as I understand it, you've taken on some new duties at the ICBA. So tell me about your brand new job and what it's all about.
Well, thanks for the recognition, and it's a privilege to step into this role. But I must admit, it's a weighty time to be taking on as the leader of and the Chief Innovation Officer for ICBA. As you know, we represent nearly 4,000 banks that are critical to this community model that's been built and established in this country, and truly the backbone when it relates to lending for small business and certainly agriculture, et cetera. So having the privilege to be able to lead this organization and these very passionate and dedicated bankers to ensure that we keep them relevant in this environment is a very important role, and one I do not take lightly. Um, you know, just returning from Money 2020, and we chatted about this a little bit earlier. It's kind of remarkable what we're seeing that's taking place. And to your point today, how work is changing. And as someone said to me, and I'll repeat, is that we are truly in an iPhone moment. So the role that I have today as it relates to that and the importance of being able to be a good Sherpa on this journey, and not only being able to bring the right solutions to our banks, but also the right thought leaders to our banks. I, I don't need to be the smartest guy in the room, and I don't want to be. It's an awful lot of responsibility, but this role enables me to use this platform to ensure that we're really having an impact in terms of how the ICBA, which not only does such a great job in terms of advocacy, which is really important right now as the government is going through the changes it's going through from a regulatory environment, et cetera, but our capacity to educate our bankers well, and lastly, to help them innovate effectively. So it's it's exciting to be in this role, and I look forward to the work ahead. I've got plenty of it, that's for sure.
Well, you got a front row seat, don't you? You get to see some
I
of the
do.
most amazing new innovation and then try to assess whether or not it's relevant for community banks. So, tell me about some of the things that you're most excited about.
Well, I think obviously the issues of artificial intelligence and stablecoin are kind of sucking all the air out of the room right now, right? And I also want to make sure that as we think about those things, obviously we're talking about programming money. I mean,
Yeah.
what a remarkable thought when we think about stablecoin. Its implications for community banking are far reaching. Some to be very concerned about, others I think there's opportunity. And so we have a ways to go there yet, obviously with the Genius Act coming into play, and then we have the Clarity Act coming behind that. So trying to figure out how to set up these market structures and so forth. A lot of people jumping into the fray as it relates to that. We've seen North Dakota with their Rough Rider coin, et cetera. So we'll see some of this little nerve wracking to the extent of its impact potentially on community banks. Um, AI, gosh, where do we begin, Todd? Right? It is absolutely changing the way we work. It is, you know, again, I know that it's very much part of your business on a day-to-day basis in terms of how you're looking at this, but you know, um, it's just some of the things that I've seen recently in its application is really quite remarkable. But I also think where we need to use it the most, besides obviously changing how we work, workflows, those sort of things, is we still can't forget about what is the most critical issue that our banks face today, which is that of fraud, right?
Yeah, of course.
You know,
Yeah.
obviously AI, like I said, in stablecoin are still taking the air out of the room, but how are we using AI in particular to help us do a better job with fraud? Because it is still, I mean, I was on the phone with a banker this past week who had a wire issue for $1.5 million and lost it. And it was done through a hack and it was done through fraudulent. And clearly there were behaviors there that were able to be identified, and perhaps AI, I think, could have been helpful there.
One thing I would say, I met you a couple of years ago, and it's amazing how far we've come just in the couple of years that I've known you, where every banker was so worried about the consideration of AI, the threat to their business, et cetera. And then, now as we find ourselves a couple of years down the road, everybody's really trying to figure out what it means for them. I think that most have finally gotten some religion. Are you seeing that with the bankers that you're interacting with? I know some must still be a little bit leery, but what are you
Yeah.
seeing just in terms of the appetite with bankers around, AI and willingness to adopt now?
First and foremost, I think there's clear recognition by the majority of them that this is not something that's going to go away.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to figure out how to embrace it. I think the next thing is okay, how do we establish policy? Even if that policy right now is we're not going to use AI. I think policy is something that the banks will um, need to embrace. I think it's always a work in progress.
Yeah.
You can establish an AI policy today, and I'm going to tell you in probably 6 months, it has the potential to be partially obsolete. Right.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure.
The the use cases are starting to present themselves much more effectively, particularly I think as we look into things like obviously the management of mundane tasks,
Yeah.
the capacity to focus on what we believe has always been what makes the difference in community banking, which is our capacity to support relationships and do that well. And I think that we have, like all things, we have bankers who are embracing it. We have a lot who are
Yeah.
sitting on the fence. And then we have a lot that just aren't sure really what to do with it yet. And that's part of my job is to help them find a path.
Yeah, you are providing education and exposure. And then also I think the inverse is true also, where innovators, looking for markets to serve, you're sort of providing an opportunity for them to understand there's this very fine 4,000, community bank ecosystem out there that's ripe for transformation. And so, you're an intermediary between the innovation that's happening with tech providers and of course the bankers. And so that's got to be a pretty exciting place to be. I'm kind of jealous. It seems like you've got a very good gig, Wayne, from my perspective.
Well, I'm very fortunate, and I say that emotionally. I first of all, having an opportunity to work with courageous founders like yourself and others is one of the best parts of my job. I mean, you know, how you guys get up every day, and again, I identify very much as an entrepreneur from the work that I've done in my own life, but
Yeah,
we get up, we want to fix stuff. That's what we want to
yeah,
do. We get up in the
yes,
morning and we say, God, this is broken. I want to go fix this. And I'm going to figure out how to fix it. And I'm going to walk through walls and do the things I got to do. So having a chance to work with passionate founders who care about the
yeah,
customers, our industry, community banking is a delight. And then on the other side of that equation is getting a chance to work with the bankers.
yes,
And,
right.
you know, I'm not a banker. I don't profess to be one. But I've been at this for about a decade now. And I've had the privilege of listening to thousands of bankers talk about banking and their needs and their challenges and also the opportunities.
When you were introducing yourself, you introduced the ICBA, but you've got this amazing innovation program. Just elaborate a little bit on some of the things that you're doing as a part of the program. I think our audience would be, interested to learn.
Well, I appreciate that opportunity to talk about it. You know, we started this, I guess we're kicking off our 10th cohort. And as far as the accelerator is concerned, will be in January. So been at this about 7 or 8 years. I had the privilege of being able to architect this when I was the executive director in Little Rock at the Venture Center, having done this with FIS and then met Kevin Tweddle, and we built this program and architected it together for where we stand today as far as the ICBA is concerned. And, you know, I think we've evolved, right? I think that's been interesting. We first started this, we were really pretty much in the startup space.
Yeah,
These were very early companies. They needed capital just even to show up and so forth. So likely didn't have any customers, weren't in market yet, but maybe had a great idea. And while it was enjoyable and interesting to work with those companies, and the bankers enjoyed it as well, at the end of the day, they didn't provide a ton of value, at least immediate value to the banks, because they were still probably 12, 18, or even as much as 36 months away from going to market. Obviously core integrations, all the things associated with that. This is an industry that moves a little bit more glacially than I would like it to.
yeah,
And I'm hopeful that as these new technologies come into play and some of these changes are occurring, that it is lighting a little bit of a fire in some areas, because we need to move at a faster pace without question.
yeah,
Um, as the program evolved, we moved further upstream. We looked at obviously companies like HuLoop and others that were in market had customers, and really our promise changed into being one of, you know, providing what we like to suggest are bank ready or shovel ready solutions, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
that that our promise is these are solutions that our banks can likely put to work or deploy tomorrow.
Yes.
And I think our bankers found it a lot more interesting, more receptive. People have a little bit of a preconceived notion of what accelerators are. And I think the big differentiator for us is, and that I'm a little prickly about not making this a sales environment, right?
Hmm.
But rather an opportunity to collaborate.
Yeah.
Look, I always like to say it's a little bit of a lie because obviously the companies that come through the accelerator are looking to garner business. But given the opportunity to talk to 100 plus bankers over a 10-week period in 30-minute increments
Yeah.
is of such high value to the bankers and also to the fintechs. But
Yep.
this is an environment that, again, Todd, you've been through this, where this is collaborative. This is problem solution. Here's what I'm doing. Does it
Yeah.
make sense? If it doesn't, how do I make it make sense for community banking? And that privilege of really what I call discovery at scale is unlike, I think, any other program that exists. And very proud that we've protected that the companies coming into the program understand that, and that our bankers continue to be attracted and come back to it because this is not somebody knocking on their door trying to pitch them software. You know, we spent a lot of time, Todd, talking about the why innovation is
Yeah.
important to our banks, right?
Right.
But I'm hell bent now on driving us towards the how and the what.
That's right.
Our bankers, many of our banks, this is a very frothy time, as we've talked about. There's lots of things to be taken into consideration, and we need to be Sherpas in this journey as well, and also be sensitive to all of our banks may be at a little different part of this journey.
Yeah. That's right.
When's the right time for us to help guide them and so forth? But ultimately, with the programming that I do inside of the ICBA for community banking, our objective is to be the trusted advisor to them on this journey we call innovation.
You know, so much focus is put on the innovation. And, I guess there's two angles we can kind of explore. One is the realities that these bankers have been using the same foundational technology for years, maybe decades.
Yeah.
And so the infrastructure that's handling, the core business, the core systems, if you will, isn't none of them are spring chickens, but they're so essential, to the successful execution of a given bank. And so they have an important role to play despite their longevity or how long, we've depended upon them. And then, of course, a lot of the technology that you get exposed to are things that have to interact with that foundational technology. And so talk a little bit about that because banking's a little bit unique in that they hang on to their systems for a long time. And so anything neat, new, innovative that they're going to do is going to have to somehow hook back with something that may have been there for 20 years.
Listen, I would like to have the ability when I was a sales guy to sell a product to somebody to write a contract for 15 years.
Yeah,
Right. I mean, it's kind of remarkable, isn't it?
that's right. Yeah, it is.
The cores, it's an interesting relationship between the cores and the bankers, and
Yeah,
being respectful of what they have and who they are. They also have been challenged with how they change.
yeah,
And part of that's due to their size and shape. The FISERVs, the FISs, et cetera, they're big boats and they're
yes,
hard to turn. I think what's difficult for the banks, particularly as you get into that sub $1 billion range as it relates to this, is the cores have really been their IT shops for a
yes.
lot of
That's right.
years.
Yeah,
And in
great
order
way
to
to
integrate
describe it.
effectively to work with those banks, you've got to work with the core in some fashion if your solution demands that or needs that.
Why don't we kind of shift a little bit? So
Sure.
we're talking about innovation, and our last portion of the discussion was a little bit about call it tech debt or legacy infrastructure, but banks are foundationally people businesses,
You bet.
and you know we're always talking about the latest AI solution or the latest fraud solution, as you point out, but we don't spend enough time talking about people adoption, uh, yeah, how they're gonna embrace whatever the technology is. I'd love to get your perspective on the people side of things, the human side of things.
Yeah. Well, I think let me preface the conversation by saying Um, it is all about people, right? And of course, one of the things that we're very prideful about in community banking is the relationships. And,
Yes.
one of the reasons that I'm a huge fan of community banking is when I was a young man and I bought my first business, I needed some money for a piece of equipment. Of course, I went to the big banks, which is where I had my relationship, and I got no satisfaction and stumbled into a bank in the community where the business that I had purchased was, and sat down in front of the third generation who had run that bank, who I also found out the business that I bought at the time was a restaurant, was
Mm.
also an avid participant in my restaurant. I was in the bar pretty much on a daily basis. And I should have known that, but I didn't. Um, was willing to give me a loan very quickly for about $8,500 at the time, based pretty much on my character, my understanding of that business and its performance. So, community banking has been, part of my life because of the opportunities that created for me. And having owned and operated a lot of small businesses, community banks are always there to support me because that's their model, that's their style, and that's how they work. So I think that's an important part of that, is that I think one of the objectives we see as we bring this technology to bear is, again, the reduction of the routine, the mundane, to be able to focus more on the relationship or look at the relationship differently.
Yeah.
Um, the other side of this, I think is, and the importance here, Todd, is this starts at the top of the organization.
Yeah.
The people in the organization will react well to the embracing of this technology and the changes that are going to occur. But that begins with the leadership in the bank.
Yeah.
If the
Sure does.
leadership in the bank doesn't embrace this and recognize that we need to be thinking differently and acting differently and have a willingness to experiment and test and fail and learn, then pretty hard to push that down inside the organization. And we struggle with this because we have a large percentage. In fact, the majority of our leadership at community banking today is 3 to 5 years away from retirement.
Yeah.
So this is a succession issue. So I think, and then you talk about the things that are coming and how do we effectively upskill our people? We hear so much about artificial intelligence and AI taking jobs.
Yeah.
I have various opinions on that. I'm sure there are some jobs that it will certainly change. I don't know that it'll take them away, because it's the people that are going to know how to put this technology to work and how to manage it effectively that will continue to retain their jobs and will have responsibility for managing the agents that will become the next generation of employees here, right?
Yeah.
So, um, you know, uh, I think people are nervous about their jobs. I think
It is
that's
true.
a fair place to be, but should be more nervous about not taking the time to upskill themselves and also their organizations. And I think that's a critical role. I feel when we talk to those two big issues of AI and stablecoin in particular, we are absolutely in an educational phase. But I
That's
think
right.
we're moving more quickly on the AI piece because it's not as well. It's got regulatory confines as well. But stablecoin's a whole other issue as it relates to that. But I believe that probably 50% of your job on a day-to-day basis is educating people about the capacity of this technology, how to deploy it effectively, and the importance that leadership plays in that process.
Yeah, I totally agree. And um, for us, we're also having, to talk about organizational readiness. What does it look like? What does good look like? What does bad look like? And while the motivation for engaging with this technology may be to grow assets, grow revenues, grow customer relations, the reality is that our people need a what's in it for me also. And so my own experience is that those leaders that understand that there's got to be something that the employees get out of it. And look, I often find that people are working harder than ever. They're stressed. They have
Mm.
a hard time with work home life balance. And bringing new innovation that allows them to reclaim some of their sanity, maybe refocus what they spend their time on to be more value adding. I think the leaders that get that and are sort of getting buy-in in the organization because of the benefits for our people, ultimately are the ones that have the most success. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. You probably encounter it a lot more than I do.
Yeah, I don't know that a large number of folks who are working in the bank today have had an opportunity to experience the impact of that from the standpoint of improving work-life balance and their work
Yeah, that's
environment.
true. That's
So,
just the promise, right?
well, but and that elephant's getting eaten a little bit at
Yeah.
a time, as they like to say. But I think what people are seeing with the utilization of what's come into our world through ChatGPT and this generative AI is when they're starting to see what I want to plan a trip, right? They're using it personally, or they need to respond to a letter, or this isn't cheating, right? This isn't plagiarism necessarily. This is creating efficiencies and perhaps a better work product
Yeah.
than what we've been able to produce historically. And you start to see that you can generate something truly in seconds that may have taken you hours or days. You start to understand the weight of what this opportunity and this technology has to us.
Oh, yeah.
Now, how I direct that and deploy that to create a higher level of employee satisfaction, I think the jury's still out on that. I think that is part of the promise here. I think that'll be accomplished, but I think the proof's in the pudding, as they say. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
think I think I think our leadership needs to see that. There's no question. I think we're talking about the same measures. What is the ROI? And that ROI, to your point, is not just economic,
Yeah.
right? It's,
Yeah, it's not.
I mean, the other thing that's so important here is the great promise of this is better customer experiences, and that customer's inside and outside the bank, right? And if I can lend to you faster and make that relationship better, and I can feel that I can be more productive, man, that gets the dopamine going a little bit, doesn't it? I got a happier
Yeah.
customer. I can do more work. I can generate more lending. I can create more efficiency for the bank. I mean, there's a lot of really positive things that come out of putting this to work. The question is how to put it to work and where to begin. And I think that's a big challenge for our banks.
And it's about shaping the customer journey, but also providing growth opportunities. And so much focus around AI and innovation in general is where can I save money? Where can I cut costs? Where can I drive efficiency? But we're moving that top line and doing it more effectively, that's so much more rewarding and exciting. And so if we can find ways to maybe offer to a client something that they would not have otherwise gotten from the bank, amazing, right? And if it was friction free, amazing. And
Yeah.
with some of the innovation that is making its way in the digital banking space, it's a little bit more self-service. Some bankers have to get their head around the fact that self-service doesn't mean bad service. It might mean better service in some cases, right? And so,
Yeah. I made up a word that I'll share with you, which is transrelational, right?
yeah,
Which is that capacity to be transactional and maintain the
yeah,
relationship at the same time, right?
yeah,
And you're right. I mean, you know, we have some bankers who would suggest to you that they don't have to worry about big banks coming into their communities. Todd,
yeah,
they're already there, right? Okay.
yeah,
And part of that's how that generations want to interact with that. But look, this is repetitive from the standpoint of creating that better experience. I there was a solution we saw a few years back that worked on taking change out of the transaction, and one of the companies that tested this transaction platform was Chick-fil-A,
oh
and
yeah,
not related to banking, but what they were able to do by taking coins out of the transaction was to be able to get 8 more people through the line at Chick-fil-A on an hourly basis. Well, you think about the magnitude of that across that franchise group, and it's, to your point, its impact on the top line was really quite remarkable. So
yeah,
this sort of applies here when you think about the fact that if I can ingest documents, right? If I can assess risk, if I can mitigate fraud, like
yep,
just the capacity of AI to work on the fraud issue, which changes daily, hourly, and every minute. If I can protect myself and my bank more effectively, perhaps I can work on other things associated to help mitigate fraud more effectively for my bank. If I can lend more because I have better access to better data, right? Then, and I can get, in the comparison to the Chick-fil-A, I can get more throughput,
Yeah,
right?
throughput.
Well,
Yep.
that's to your point, that's a top line issue that impacts efficiency, all these
Yep.
sorts of things. So, yeah, I mean, there's great promise in what's ahead.
So, all right. So you were talking about the promise. So, what are the top three things bankers need to have on their radar screen over the next 12, 18, 24 months?
Well, um, I think we've touched on the whole issues as it relates to artificial intelligence, right?
Mhm.
Again, I think what's important there is for them to obviously they need to be thinking about this. Again, it's not going away. Start small, find some projects to work on, find a great vendor partner to work with to help guide them in this journey, as you guys do at HuLoop, for example. And I know this is not about that, but it's important because, you know, we need to do a little hand holding here. And I don't say that in a derogatory fashion, but
Right.
this is a big topic. So where do I start? Right. I think learning how to use this technology and upskilling our people internally is a key issue.
Yes.
Um, if we don't know how to put this to work, it's going to pass us by. It's already getting pretty close, right? We've got some catching up to do as it relates to that. Uh, I think uh, there's a need for them to be adaptable and flexible as it relates to this, and
Yep.
you know this again, as we talked earlier in the conversation today, this is something that starts at the leadership level of the organization, and it's important enough that somebody within the organization should take ownership of this and should be in charge of it. And perhaps there's a committee, et cetera. I know just in the last week or two, working with my own team as I step into this role, I'm trying to get a clear understanding of how each of them is putting this to work and where do they feel they are in terms of their own knowledge base. And how do I find the resources for them to help them upskill, right?
All right. So let's kind of wrap up with lightning round. Quick, quick questions, quick answers. Okay.
Do my best.
All right. Here we go. Name one old school banking principle that will never go out of style.
Relationships.
Okay. Yep. That's a good one. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we really want to preserve that. I mean, that's what we're going to work
Yeah.
hard to. And we can do that digitally and as well as physically.
Yeah. I'm totally with you. That's a good answer. What's one buzzword you wish would just disappear?
Funny enough, I've never been a big fan of accelerator, right?
Okay.
No, I mean, the reason I say that is I think I don't know that most of them do that, right? And as an entrepreneur, one of the reasons that I enjoyed getting into doing this work was to do it differently. So many of them are just built around creating opportunities for investors. Well,
Yeah.
okay, what are we really doing for the entrepreneur and for the businesses that are associated with it? So, that's a little bit more unicorn hunting. So I've struggled to find another explanation for accelerator, but I'd like to. Somebody's got a good idea there. Let me know.
If innovation were a sport, what position would community banks play?
Ooh, good one. Um, well, I think the first answer there would be, are we on offense or defense? Right? Because, baseball's an interesting sport. It's the only game where the defense actually manages the ball. Right? So can we be the pitcher in that instance and throw the right pitches and make it possible to maybe strike out the other team occasionally? But
Yeah.
maybe also point guard would be another one. But I think we got to be able to shoot and also mine the net. I think we have to be able to play both sides of that line.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. This is an interesting one. What's the most human thing that you do at work that no AI could ever replace?
I'm a big fan of breaking bread together.
Oh, yeah.
You
Interesting.
know, I I think great things happen at big tables, and when you get a chance to share a little food and some thinking, and I think it's underrated. I know, we've had that experience where we've sat down as a cohort and broken bread together, and the experience that you share, the insights, the personalized understanding of other people's lives and stuff. I don't know. AI can't create a cheeseburger, and it can't share so much in the conversation, although it probably could at our dinner table. But let's hope we continue to break bread together and do it a little bit more frequently, right? That'd be good.
Well, I'll tell you, Wayne, I'm so excited for you and your new responsibilities with the ICBA. You're an ideal person because you really have a handle on innovation. And of course, your ability to bridge bankers and innovators and investors for that matter I think is you're truly impressive. And so I very much appreciate you being, a guest on my podcast today. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for your time. Any closing words from you?
No, Todd, first of all, humbled and honored to do this with you. Again, we've had the privilege of working together, and I think we'll continue to. I know we'll continue. So I think the future is bright. I admire your dedication and your commitment to what we're trying to accomplish in community banks, and also what you're bringing to us as you learn about what you're doing across other industries. It's not just about banking. And I learned, having served in other industries, one of the things I feel like I'm able to do sometimes is perhaps bring a different perspective. It's not all been banking in my life. I think I come about this about 360 degrees, and you as well. Look, it's a transformative time, and we need to embrace that. We need to work at it together. This is hand to hand combat, right?
It
When
is.
it comes to some of this stuff, but I think we're a lot stronger working together. And I think what I hope to do every day is to make sure we're, like I said, we're bringing the best of breed in both thought leadership as well as solutions to our bankers and working at this together. I think part of the privilege of having these conversations and sharing these ideas to hopefully stimulate thinking in others to take action,
I
because
think,
ultimately for those that aren't embracing this and is in inaction as a strategy, it's the wrong one right now. And we can be helpful.
Wayne, you've been an amazing guest. Thank you so much.
Todd, my privilege. Thank you. And we'll see you on the road, my friend.